Welcome to the Business Pro League podcast. My name is Daniel, and today I have a very special guest by the name of Murray. Murray is a chartered accountant in New Zealand and is currently running a company called the Cash Out Catalyst. And I thought it would be really interesting to have a conversation with Murray because as we were talking prior to this podcast, the best time to start planning for your exit is the day you start your business, because you just don't know when you're going to have to sell your business, whether it's through retirement, whether that's through being approached by a competitor to buy you out, or in the worst case scenario, something happens to your health. So I thought this would be a great conversation to talk to Murray about his business and why he started his business, and a little bit more about what are the things that we should be thinking about when it comes to building a business that adds value and increases value for when it comes time to sell. So thanks for being with us, Murray. I appreciate your time.
Thanks very much for inviting us online.
Yeah, great. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your story and how you came to start the Cash Out Catalyst?
Okay. Like you, Daniel, I started off in commerce. I qualified as a chartered accountant. I quickly learned that if I want to charge for my services outside of my employment structure, that I needed to have a public practice license. So I went down that avenue. Throughout my journey as a chartered accountant, and more as a CFO, I worked across a diverse range of industry. Some of it was not-for-profit, some of it was Maori iwi, some of it was research and development in terms of wind farms. And at one stage, having worked for about 13 years in automotive, I was asked to become a dealer principal on a 12-month contract. And that contract was all about turning the business around, making it profitable, ready for sale. And I had quite a task because I only had 12 months to do it. Right on the 12th month, I got there. The business was quite quickly sold afterwards, and I moved on. And I moved on to working in a chartered accounting office. And one of their major clients was a Maori iwi who were looking to have sustainability of income. And one of their projects, well, the initial project was they had 2 farms. They had investment developments in the Gold Coast as as apartments. And they were looking at biofuels and also at wind farms. So I spent 3.5 years on wind farm development. That later on transversed to Murray saying, hey, let's do it for yourself. So that's where I set up my practice inside CA. And in that journey, I noticed that, we all talk about the baby boomers, but baby boomers are here for a while and they don't know how to exit their business. And too often, the statistics in New Zealand are that it gets all too hard, and some of them, if they haven't planned, they actually retire and close the doors without a sale. And you put your lifetime work into it. If only you've had fun. And so with the use of a coach, I have developed the Cash Out Catalyst in the last 18 months, and that's an education tool. So I'll teach you the importance of it, and I'll mentor you. And having finished the program, if you want ongoing support, then we'll mentor you for another 12, 15, 18 months, however long it takes you, so that you're comfortable that you've got your business ready for sale.
Great. Yeah, I think that's such a fascinating perspective, because I was reading something recently that was saying something to that effect, that the number of businesses that are set to close, not because it's a bad business, often they're actually quite good services, good clients, good client base, but they just haven't set it up right so that it can attract a quality buyer, and they end up just closing their doors, and all of that work, like you said, just really ends to nothing because they haven't prepared for the sale. So when we're thinking about setting up a business for sale, what are we talking about? What are the things that make it attractive for someone to buy a business?
It doesn't really apply to a one-man band because it's a bit hard to push it all in together. And if you don't prepare for sale, I say, well, if you don't prepare for sale, you're a real estate transaction. You go to the broker, either turns you away and says you're not ready, or yeah, I'll sell it, but yeah, your buyers are going to be hard to locate, and you'll just take what the market offers you. The idea of going into business, investing your lifetime's work with you, is actually to come out of it with a retirement package, at a premium. And that's what it's about. So maybe I can start to talk to you what it looks like.
Yeah.
And as you said, the day you start your business is the day you find or plan your exit. Because at the end of the day, are you going to sell to your children? If you're going to sell to your children, it's a zero price because they'll never pay you. On death, they'll have a gift to them. Right?
Yeah.
So the next one to think about is, are you going to sell to your middle management or to your management? Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, you might be selling it to them at a discounted price. The third one is actually can be in two combinations. It can be you sell to the open market. So when you go to the open market, is the buyer that's looking to buy your business, is he going to roll his sleeves up and do the work, or is he a passive investor? And the pricing is a bit different, believe it or not. So yeah, that's the avenue we go down. So otherwise, it's a case of you're selling to your kids, you're selling to management, you're selling to an investor who wants to work in your business, or he wants to be a passive investor.
And what's the difference between someone wanting to buy who's an active investor and someone who's more of a passive investor? Like, what are they motivated by when they're buying a business?
It's often, if you're rolling your sleeves up and doing it, it's a remuneration there that will sustain the expected remuneration that I want.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you the active investor looking for a more long-term scope and saying, well, so long as I get a return of 10 or 12, 15% or more after tax, then okay. It depends on the business. It depends on the market segment. It depends on that stage of business cycle that you're in. Is the product new to the market? Is it nearing its finite life? And you factor all of those into it.
Yeah. So let's talk. So how would you? So let's say you're making the decision between one of those four exits. Well, I guess you're not always sure whether you're going to get a passive or an active investor.
No, you're not, but you got to be prepared.
Yeah. So are you recommending people to do the same, add the same value to the business, regardless of whether you're going to hand it on to your kids, do a management buyout, or sell it to an investor? Are you taking the same approach to each one of those, or are you taking slightly different approaches depending on what you think is going to be the likely outcome?
And basically, I go down the track of it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if it's your children, they've invariably worked in the business, so they know part of the process, right? You're selling it to management, and the management have done a good job in their function, then they'll know the business as well. But if you're selling to an outsider, they may or may not know your industry, right? And so you've got to be prepared for that. The other thing to consider that if you're selling to the external, or even to the internal, it is if you're a multinational franchise, do you have the rights to sell the franchise?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, one stage I worked in motor vehicle wholesale and we sold, but first we had to get the manufacturer overseas to do their own due diligence on our prospective buyer before they gave the accreditation to allow the sale to happen. So it's, there are considerations right through the process.
Yeah, great. So what are the key areas that we're talking about? So someone's decided, okay, yep, I haven't thought about exiting my business. I want to start thinking about exiting now. I want to, really make sure my business is set up for sale. What's the first thing that they should be looking into or focusing on to add value to their business?
Okay, so we talk three principles or three pillars in your business. The first one is systemize your business. And now that's really the top 10, 15 systems and processes. And you as the owner shouldn't be doing it. It's your staff. Yeah. And if your staff don't think have the capability, then you engage an external consultant who knows systemization, and they will systemize it for you. So the outcome of that is that if I was to walk into your business or you were to walk into that business, could you pick up a procedure manual, whether it's in hard copy or electronic, follow a process and get me a similar outcome to what to what the owner would have got?
Mm-hmm.
And you do that with all key systems. And having done it once, you've got to keep remembering that if you have a systems upgrade or a process change, that you've got to keep updating the documentation. By having your business systemized, your employees aren't the order takers. They have to come to you every 5 minutes and say, hey, I've done that. What's my next task? They should have a system and process, a job description, which tells them what their functionality is in the business. And as I say, it's, you can go overboard with 200 systems, but at the end of the day, it's the top 10, 15 that are key. Right? The second part.
Sorry, just before you go into that, is what kind of systems would you be talking about? Like finance systems, like operation, like when you say the top 5, 10 to 15, what kind of systems would you be focusing on?
Yeah, well, it depends on your industry. So one is, how do you, from an order inquiry, an online inquiry or a phone inquiry that you've done an outreach for, how do you document the initiation of that client into your system so that they get email follow-ups and you get a conversion, right? So it's their onboarding. It's no different if we're an accountant trying to onboard a client. There are certain things that you need to get them on board so that you and your staff know all about it. Then if you're a manufacturing process, it's what are you selling? And if you've taken an order, what are the specifics of that order and how is that order initiated to go into the process? Someone takes an order, if it's an engineering one, someone's going to take it through drafting. From drafting, it's got to go back to the client, get signed off. It comes back, it goes into manufacturing. The manufacturing staff understand what the order is. They order the raw materials. They then, when the raw materials are in, they then assign it to the factory floor. And then the floor manager takes the task over. And there's a quality control measure all the way through that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one example, but it's, and the principles of onboarding an client's no different to onboarding an employee. You go through the process, you make an offer, you get acceptance, you issue a contract, you get it signed, you go through an induction, they're on board.
Yeah.
And then you have a performance review, etc.
Yeah, great.
So as I say, it's documenting every step of that process. And if we refer back to the manufacturing situation, it's been through design, it's been signed off, it's gone to procurement. From procurement, they need to know who are our supply lists, and do we have preferential buying rights within a particular client base or supplier base? Otherwise you're wasting time.
Yeah.
Right. So that's systemization, and that can take 12, 18 months, depending on how sophisticated your business is. But the business has to keep moving forward. So that's systemization. The idea, as I say, is you don't want your employees to be order takers. They should have job descriptions. They should know how to carry out their job on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So I've said to some of my clients that they challenge themselves. Do I have it all right? Have I missed a step? Well, I say to them, well, why don't we get a mystery buyer in, right? And that buyer will come in and sit in that desk with that procedure manual and follow that process. And if there's a failure, you go and work out where the weak point is and keep modifying it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So pillar 2 that we talk about is replace yourself in the business. So, and this is where in accounting terms, we talk about above the line and below the line. So above the line means that you should be the director, the general manager, the managing director, and you should be chasing your next ROI, right? You've delegated all your tasks and responsibilities to a senior manager, and he has his subordinates, and they're below the line. The manager sits below the line, but he's at the top of below the line. And as I say, you should be planning your next ROI. And at that stage, we would start to be, depending on the incumbent who's actually looking to sell, have they worked in the business 6-7 days a week, or are they quite comfortable on doing a 40-hour week, right? If they're one of those that is doing 60 and 70 hours, you've got to start encouraging them, right, to work outside the business, find hobbies, right? Because at some finite date or semi-finite date, they're not going to have a job to come to work.
Yeah.
And so they have to refocus themselves. And I say, it's a psychological one where you start to train them to think outside the square, to take a few days off, to go and take a holiday. And what happens if I went on holiday for 3 months without picking up the phone? Does the business run successfully? And if not, better.
Yeah, totally. And that's an interesting one because it's so, I find for a lot of business owners that releasing of control is one of the biggest challenges for a lot of business owners, whether it's because they're worried about, the quality of the work or whatever. But if, like you said, if you've systemized the business, then the quality of the work and the quality of the products that are being delivered should be as good as if they were working in the business or working outside of the business. They shouldn't have too much of a change. But it's almost like that some of these business owners, they have so much identity wrapped up in the delivery of their business that to step outside of that is almost like they almost lose sight of who they are if they're not inside the business. Is that the experience that you've had with some of them?
Yeah, and that's where there's a weakness in the sale process. Because if I was coming to you, why am I coming to you in your business? Is it because I want to deal with you personally? Or is it the product and service that you're offering that I want? And so long as it's the product and service and they offer the quality and the various backup guarantees, that's what it should be about. It's not about you. Because if you died tomorrow, would those customers still come to your business? And you've got to hope like hell the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're too focused on it right to the nth hour, you haven't got a business. You don't demand a premium for your sale.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we've talked about systemization. We've talked about replacing yourself in the business. And the third one would be dear to your heart is knowing your numbers. So here we talk both financial and non-financial numbers. So let's talk initially the non-financial numbers. So it's how good's your website? Are you getting leads from your website? And if not, why not? What's going wrong? Right? If you're getting leads from your website, how good is your conversion rate? Right? It doesn't matter if you're in a manufacturing process, how many quotes do you do? And of those quotes, what's your acceptance rate? And you need to start exploring if you've got less than 80%, right? Is someone tire kicking you and they're only after the best price, or are they wanting quality service, right? So your website and your conversion factor is a key element. The next one that we look at is your top 10 or 15 customers. How much of your business is represented by them? And what happens if, for whatever reason, one of those was to leave you? Does your business survive? So I had a client here in New Zealand, and he was about year 4 into his growth phase. He was in HR recruitment, and he supplied both permanent staff and casual staff to a multinational tech industry type client. And when I first went to him, I said, mate, you haven't got a business. And he says, yes, I have. Look at this. I said, yes, 95% of your revenue is one client. And you've got 8 consultants working with you through 10 to 15 key, we say, codes throughout New Zealand. Pods, we use the word pods. 10 to 15 CODs throughout New Zealand. It only takes one bad comment or one negative reaction by one of your consultants, which annoys them, and they feed it back through the chain right up to head office, and all of a sudden you're dismissed. Right? Now you've got 8 to 10 employees or consultants that you've got to feed. So have you got a business? And the answer is no. And he said, oh, hell, I had never thought of that aspect. And so the idea was he had to go and find competing type clients that he could de-risk on.
Yeah.
So that's a key element. Other non-financials is your employees. They're one of the most valuable intangible assets of the business. If you recognize them, you reward them throughout their cycle, then they will promote you as a brand. And that's what you want on exit. However, what you have to make sure is when the person was employed, were they employed and then you made a job around them? Or did you go the proper way, the proper channel, which is you decide on, you do a person specification, and then you find the client or the employee to match that person specification. The other one to think about there is how, because if you're looking to buy a business, the first thing you're going to do is see how good the staff are, right? So you're going to audit the employment records. So if you've got some bad eggs or average eggs in the basket as employees, they're not your ideal brand, right? So you've got to transition them out well in advance of any sale, right? And taking you into like a legal due diligence process, we've talked about, do you have the right to sell the business or do you not, right? Conversely, do you have a lease in place? How long until the lease expires? Are you on a renewing process of 2x2 or 3x3 or 6x6? Or is it going to finish in a finite date in 18 months? Well, that's the last thing a buyer wants, because we know within 12, 18 months that there's an unknown overhead, which is either a rent increase or a relocation expense. Okay. Conversely, it can work the other way. And I'm going through this with a client at the moment, whereas they are part owners in the building, in a separate corporate structure. And I said, hey, you haven't got a lease in place, although you're a shareholder. So I said, go get your lease in place, go talk to your other shareholder. But what came through, not from them, but from the business brokers, Murray, it might not be advantageous to have the lease signed, because if someone buys this business, they might want to consolidate it into their own structure.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons in having the lease signed. So let's now come back and look at the financial numbers. Anyone who's experienced chatting with their accountants is always going to try to get the lowest profit for the least tax. And by that, they're pushing a lot of personal expenses into the business.
Yeah.
And I say that's wrong. And it's not because I'm a tax agent, but think of it from the other side. The higher your price, the more tax you're paying, the higher your exit price is going to be, because your exit price is going to be a multiple of what we call EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, and depreciation. So the higher you get that figure, times its multiple, is the higher exit price, which is capital free. Sorry, it's tax free. So it's always about cleansing the accounts 2 or 3 years prior, if not more, or be in that situation where you, shall we say, tax honest and go and clean all the way through. Because the day, as you rightly said, you don't know when your business is going to be on the market.
Yeah. Today
you could go home, and on the way home you have a major car accident. You may work, and you may never work, and you may die. And in each of those, potentially, there's no time to prepare your business for sale.
Mm.
And the other urgent one to think about is cancer is upon us, and you never know. You could go to the doctor today, have a checkup, and he says, mate, you got stage 4 cancer, right? You're going to flip your lid and think, how the hell am I going to get my business ready, right? So my tagline is, don't let your lifetime work retire with you. In other words, when you set up your business, did you set it up as a job or as an investment? Did you put funds aside for retirement? Because you don't know what your exit price is likely to be for the business. And, if the business is one of those that unfortunately doesn't do that well, then there is no retirement fund on exit.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So can you explain a little bit more about the multiple? Because obviously when people go, start talking about, selling a business, they always tend to talk about, multiples of profit. Can you explain a bit more about what a multiple is and what increases a multiple for sale?
Okay, so loosely, people will talk about a multiple of 2, 3, or 4, depending on your industry segment. So what it is, you take your net profit, you add back those costs or you equalize the costs. So you add back depreciation and you add back interest and you add back shareholders' remuneration. Now let's talk each of those. So Daniel, you might be comfortable on $100,000 a year as a remuneration, but I might be comfortable on $200,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's an imbalance there. So you add it back. Interest. I might be cash rich and 100% fund this business, whereas Daniel, you may be 40% geared with borrowings. Right? So to get an equilibrium between the two, you add it back.
Mm-hmm.
Depreciation is fair wear and tear over the life of an asset. And while I might have assets that are only 18 months, 2 years, 3 years old, you might have, in an equivalent business, you might have assets that are 13, 14, 15 years old. And so your value is a lot less. So we add them back to get to a neutral position. We also, so we've added back interest, we've added back depreciation, we've added back proprietors, and any other costs that the proprietor may have tried to sneak through on due diligence, you pull them out.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we're saying is, what is the future sustainability of this business? Typically what you do is you have your accountants go in and they'll prepare financial forecasts to see what the growth curve looks like. But before you get there, and something you do quite early in the process, is start to tweak the overheads in the business to say, hey, do we really need that? Could we do without that? Is it surplus? Is it like to have, or is it a must have? So you tweak your fixed assets. You tweak your expenses. The other one you have to really look at is looking at your gross margin. Is your margin increasing or is it decreasing? And if it's decreasing, why is it decreasing? It tends to say that you've got a change in your product mix. It tends to say that you've got a change in your supplier price and you haven't put your price up. So it's not all about putting your price up in big lumps of 10% or 5%. Why not sneak it up 2% now and 2% in 2 or 3 months? People forget it, right? But if you do a massive increase, you sometimes get buyer resistance.
Yeah.
So what the buyer wants to see is he wants to see an improvement in that profit margin.
Yeah.
So if you're going to improve and to see it sustained for 2 or 3 years, because if you're in an industry like clothing or electronics or something like that, they have short life cycles, right? That's why if you've ever got a sale going on, because if it's to do with clothing, the life of that clothing is only 3 or 4 months in terms of being in retail, and they've got to ditch it because they're bringing on the winter or the summer or the autumn type clothing.
Yeah.
So you've got to factor those in all the time, right? One I'm working in at the moment is a party hire business. So typically in this country, between beginning of May, as you start to go into the winter, and to beginning of October, there basically isn't much business, because who's going to put a marquee up and have an outdoor wedding or an event, right? So you've got to work out and factor in all of these sorts of costs when you go to market. So coming back to what is the multiple, is the number of times of your profit that you can sell the business for. Mm-hmm. So it's a case of people talk 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 times the EBITDA price. Often it's determined by where you are in your life cycle of your product, but sometimes it's determined by talking to a business broker or doing the research with a data collection house who analyzes all businesses for sale and say, hey, this is their turnover, this is their staff, this is this, and this is the price they got it for. As you go in and plan and prepare your business for sale, that you've got systemization in there, you're not the daily focus of your business, you've got good profitability, you've seen improvements in your cash flow, then there's no reason why you can't get a 3 to 5 to 6 times multiple. Mm-hmm. As I say, it's the profit times a multiple. So if you've got a $500,000 profit and we applied a multiple, that should be approximately $1.5 million. Versus if it had a multiple of 2, it's $1 million. So, and as I say, it can be industry specific. Like I know in the accounting profession, it's basically $1.10 for every dollar of revenue. So we're not the ideal type environment to be saying what is the multiple, because it's a industry practice in this country. But if you take, say, a logistics company, it is, what is the turnover? What's in case of logistics, it's what is the gross margin, because there's a huge fuel and R&M cost in there. And how sustainable is it, right? And what is your key client base looking like? Because your key clients make up a good component of it. Yeah. Do you have the orders running in daily, or do you have to headhunt or actively go and search your market every day to find a sale? Mm-hmm. And that comes back to the earlier scenario of how good's your database, how good's your conversion factor, what's your branding like? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, so there's a lot in it there, but I think what you're saying is that the stronger your business is, the higher the multiple of profit you'll be able to command when it comes to
the easier in which it is to exit the business. Mm-hmm. Right. So don't try and sell it yourself. As we say, employee experts, whether it's in accounting and law or in business broking, employ the experts, because we have a greater network than you think we have, who we can identify privately or publicly your business for sale.
Yeah.
And it could be that it's an open market sale. It could be that someone's looking to merge your business into their business and consolidate. When you're preparing your business for sale, you don't necessarily know that. Mm-hmm. But the smarter, the cleaner, the more profitable your business is, the less reliant the business is on you as the owner, the more likely it's going to sell for a premium.
Yeah. So what are some of the other risks that you've seen in this process that I guess they're risks that aren't maybe initially thought about in the process of sale, but is something that's really important to be considered in this process? Like, are there any kind of key ones that kind of jump out that you're like, this is kind of a key area that most people don't think about that they really should be thinking about?
No, I just think, systemization is all about documentation, and it's that all the way through. The last thing you want to do is go to market and you've got a product liability claim pending, right? You can't go to market where you in legal negotiation or there's talk of it. So be honest, be upfront, because it's going to bite you in the backside if you get into a due diligence process and the broker isn't aware of it.
Mm. So what's the perfect time frame? So you mentioned before that, you probably want about at least 2 to 3 years minimum of good, clean books. If you were thinking, okay, I want to, sell in the future, what's kind of the ideal obviously the ideal is from the beginning, right? Like what you were saying before. But like, if you were thinking, like, if someone's coming to the end of their career, they're thinking about selling their business, what's the kind of ideal kind of time frame that you would be saying, hey, this is the time frame that you really need to be showing positive, strong business for?
I think a minimum of 3 years, maybe 4, because at the end of the day, you want your advisor panel sitting there doing the cleanup, and then they can demonstrate 3 years of improvement having done the cleanup for you. So I would be saying 4 years being year 1, being the cleanup year, getting your margins, your break-even points, all of those sorted out, your pricing, looking at your brand, looking at your website, because that all takes 6 to 12 months to tidy up. And then once you want to show financially, you want to show 3 years of solid improvement.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Awesome. Is there anything else that you want to, you'd recommend for someone who's thinking about selling in the next wee while?
Everyone says it's not for me. But it's not for me. It's not for me the day that you no longer can work.
Yeah.
Right. So, I've got a client who is in an engineering business. I helped him buy the business 8 or 9 years ago. We brought it out of liquidation. But he was, prior to that, an employee of that company. Everything centered around him as far as he was concerned. And fatigue kicks in. He's doing 70, 80 hours a week, 6 days a week. A few times I caught him napping at his desk. And so we had this hard discussion about it, right? I showed him there's a better way. Let's start systemizing. Let's start delegation. The biggest thing is delegation.
Yeah.
The business can't rely on you because one day you're not going to be there.
Yeah.
So, in this instance, the client could see the light about delegation because he was taking on all the phone inquiries. He was doing all the quoting. He'd start the procurement and he would follow up with the invoicing, but he never followed up on his sales inquiries. So, we got someone else in to help him with his quoting, someone to follow up on his online phone and website inquiry, and all of a sudden the business, took off because he didn't think that the business could do it without him. And so that's one of the fundamentals, right? Get yourself into a position where you learn to trust and delegate. Now, I've been talking about the same business. Recently, I've introduced daily huddles to his manufacturing staff. We as a management team, I attend his management meetings online on Zoom once a week. Listen, and there was a change in the product person managing the factory floor. I says, Joe's new on there. Why don't you, he's now stepping up from being an employee to being a manager. He's got to get the buy-in of your staff. So why don't you introduce daily huddles? 10 minutes only. So he has this daily huddle where each of the persons on the factory floor come in and they say, hey, we're having this issue with this client. We need this to be ordered. We're having problems here. I need some technical expertise. I need this. I need that. And all of a sudden, efficiency, kicked in. And with efficiency came profitability.
Yeah.
So that's introducing those because you've got to be less reliant on you.
Yeah, totally. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Murray. I think that's a really important perspective that I think all of us can take away and bring into our businesses. Like you said, I love that statement that you made about, the best time to be thinking about exit is the day you start your business. I think that's a really good thought. And for someone who maybe has started their business and they haven't thought about it yet, the next best time is to think about it today. So anyway, I appreciate your time, Murray, and thank you so much for jumping on our podcast today.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you very much. And for those who want to check us out, visit my website. It's thecashoutcatalyst.com. So being a .com, you can certainly intervene from Australia. And why not take the test? There's a test on the website as to how ready are you for sale? It's a short multi-choice series of questions. It'll tell us, and we can come back to you. So that's www.thecashoutcatalyst.com.
Excellent.
Thanks very much.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining us with the Business Pro League podcast. If you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you could subscribe, rate, or comment. I'd love to hear from you and get your feedback. See you next time.